Have you ever tried to build a business between flare-ups? To climb the career ladder while your body is begging you to lie down? What does success look like when your ambition has to coexist with chronic illness? Welcome to Chronic Boss Unfiltered, the podcast where ambition meets women's health. I'm Lilly Stairs, and I've built 2 businesses while managing 3 autoimmune conditions. Each week, I sit down with powerhouse women, entrepreneurs, leaders, and changemakers who are building the career of their dreams while navigating chronic conditions. Together, we'll help you dream big while prioritizing your health. No filters, no fluff, just raw stories from the hospital bed to the boardroom. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome. Today, I am so excited that we have our very own Chronic Boss member, Justine Beauregard, with us today. Justine is a powerhouse sales strategist who's helped her clients generate millions. And I can tell you that she's amazing because I have personally worked with her and I love her authenticity, her heart, and her clarity that she brings to everything that she does. I know that you are going to get so much value out of this conversation because Justine is also a woman living with multiple chronic illnesses, and she has woven that experience into her sales philosophy and strategy. So, Justine, thank you for being with us today. I can't wait to dive in. Do you want to just take a moment to tell us a little bit more about you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think you summed it up so beautifully. I'm Justine Beauregard. I have been teaching sales for close to 20 years. It's been a love of mine since I was a little girl. I started off as an entrepreneur. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I was selling tickets to puppet shows in my backyard to the neighborhood and friendship bracelets at school and all sorts of things. So I got that bug really early. And then I took a detour and I worked for a few startups and had a variety of roles in companies, and then went back to ultimately owning my own business about 11 years ago and becoming a chronic boss and loving every minute of it, even the hard moments. There are a lot of hard moments, but we get through them. And I think, having a chronic illness has prepared me for a lot of those moments too, because we go through these seasons of flare-ups and hardships and uncertainty and self-doubt, and that's mirrored a lot in the process of entrepreneurship. So for me, it's been as much of something to learn how to navigate as it's been a gift in my career and has made me more successful because of it. So there's so much goodness to talk about.
I love that framing. That's what, as you know, we're all about a chronic boss. And it's something that I really love about you is that you have chosen to be so honest and open about your chronic conditions. In fact, when I was browsing your site in preparation for this podcast, you see it right at the top of your podcast page. You list your chronic conditions right at the top in the beginning. So how did you decide to lead with that? And how do you feel like it's impacted your business?
So it wasn't always that way. And I find it interesting. I mean, obviously you're looking for that. You're sort of magnetized to seeing how people reflect that. I think at first there was a lot of insecurity wrapped up in that. It was, what if they think I'm unreliable? What if they hear that I have certain conditions and they judge me for it in a negative way? Or they think that, I'm not as capable as someone who's quote unquote healthy and, fully at 100% all the time. But then I was talking to more and more clients, and over the years, I've had over 700 clients. So I've talked to a lot of people. And throughout those conversations, anytime that it came up privately in a conversation, which is how it kind of started, they would go, wow, that's so relatable because I have such and such condition. Or that's so helpful to hear because outside looking in, you just look like this healthy model of success and all the things that I want. And hearing that you're human too, and that you have struggles too, it makes me feel more capable and it makes me feel more empowered. And as a service provider, I am my brand in a lot of ways. And I never want people thinking, oh, she's got it all together. She has no problems. Everything for her just flows and it's easy. And for me, it's so hard. I want them to see, I get infusions every month. I have joint pain and I have medications that I'm taking all the time, and I get flare-ups and I get chronic migraines and I have all these things going on that interfere with my routines and my daily practices and what I do and how I set myself up for success. But that's also allowed me to make changes to support myself, like having flex time and flex days on my calendar and different things that I thought as an entrepreneur, I actually felt like I had less of the ability to do those things at first. But the more I've created those little pillows of possibility for myself is what I'll call them. It has opened up so much for me that I can use them when they're there if I need them, and I can just flow through them if I don't need them. And that's actually made me more successful. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it definitely didn't start off like, let me air these out on social media and tell everyone about it. But now that I have, it actually makes me feel better to empower other people through my story.
And you have. And I literally just took so many mental notes as you were talking because I have so many threads that I want to jump on. Just so many nuggets of wisdom that you spoke of there. So one thing is when you mentioned that when talking about chronic conditions was coming up organically when you were chatting with clients, it's so interesting because that's what happened to me. That was really the genesis of Chronic Boss. I of course from the jump have been open about my chronic conditions, and part of that was working in healthcare and making the decision that I was going to frame this as an asset and really own my narrative. But every time I did that, I would have people being like, "Oh my god, I have an autoimmune disease too," or "I'm dealing with depression," or "I'm whatever, you name it." And the reality is there's over 60% of people in the US alone are living with at least one chronic condition. So we are the majority. There are more of us living with it than not. And when you open that door for somebody to be able to share their experience and feel seen and feel less alone, it's really magical and it can be really meaningful to them. And it deepens the bond between you and that person quickly. And that's why we talk about our Chronic Boss Collective, how we just cut through all the BS when it comes to networking because we are connecting at this point of vulnerability. Yeah. So that I do think that there is a real asset for service providers and folks who are entrepreneurs in business or even in your career, depending upon the way you frame it, it can be a really powerful tool that not only helps you, but helps others. So I just wanted to share that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And I think it's mostly how you frame it internally, not externally. You don't have to worry so much about the way you say it or how other people receive it. It's more how you're viewing it. And actually, that was one of the big shifts for me as well in sort of airing it out into the world and making it known. It gave me that freedom and it lifted that burden off of myself. And I started looking at it as a strength. Like ADHD is one of my conditions. And looking at that as such a strength instead of a weakness, like, oh, you're someone who's unfocused and irresponsible and you fly by the seat of your pants and, you know, all of these things that are synonymous with ADHD. And I'm like, actually, I have hyperfocus. I'm extremely efficient with my time. I've built systems around that. So like, there's a lot of that beauty and looking at it and reframing it for my own self made me okay with sharing it publicly and not feel so judged because most of that judgment was coming from me, not even from other people. And that was one of the big realizations too, was if I'm sharing this and someone's going to think that I'm less of a person or less excellent because of something that I can't change, they're not my person. And I don't want them to be my client and I don't want them to follow me. I want people in my world who are going to accept me and love me and embrace me and lift me up, not tear me down or make me feel bad for things that are out of my control.
Justine, that's so beautiful. What a way with words you have. I love that. Okay. So tell me, what was the tipping point when you decided that you were going to start being more open about living with these chronic conditions? But like, it sounds like you were doing it here and there in side conversations as you got closer with clients, but how did you decide you were going to put it on your website at the top of the page?
Yeah, I think it was just so many people started asking me about it more. And there was a natural sort of, as I was writing my story, and then I was being interviewed more for podcasts and speaking on stages, and people were asking me like about those things more. And I think it was a byproduct of me speaking about it more. So I was probably subconsciously thinking about it more, raising it in more conversations, or you know, having these points of relatability with people that I was just like, you know, as I think about my story and how I'm crafting it, as we do for media kits and, interviews and everything else, we put together our background and our biography. And I noticed like this part is missing and I feel like it belongs there now. There was sort of a shift. I don't remember the exact moment or what it was, but I just remember like, this is a big part of what I'm talking to people about, what I'm being asked about, and a big part of me and has shaped me and allowed me to become the version of myself that I am today. So I don't dive deep into the details always, but I do put in my story, like, despite these things or alongside of my chronic conditions or because of them, I have been able to, and then fill in the blank. So there's different, and I play with it, but I think ultimately it's me, it's part of me, and I want to share more of myself. And as I grow more confident as well, when I started out in business, I wasn't very confident. And I had to build that muscle, which Jefferson Fisher wrote a book called Your Next Conversation. And it's a really good book. And one of the chapters that stands out, he talks about confidence is not an input, it's an output. And so when we think like, oh, I just have to be more confident and then such and such will happen, his way of thinking about it, which I totally agree with, is the more I do these things that result in confidence, the more confident I will be, like a muscle that you exercise and that you work. And so for me, it was building my confidence as a business owner. And once I had that level of, well, I don't think people care as much about my chronic conditions. They care about, can I make them more money? Can I get them more sales? Can I do these things? And once I tell that story and actually amplify how I've come up with my secret sauce, the frameworks, like a lot of the things have stemmed from that. It not only gives them reasoning for things, but it also creates relatability for a lot of people because, like you said, the majority of us do have chronic conditions. So it ticked a lot of boxes.
Oh, love it. Okay, I'm adding that to my reading list immediately. Uh, and you said the magic words, secret sauce. So
Yes.
you and I have had a lot of conversations about this because when we were working together, we were working on sales for Chronic Boss and workshopping. You said, we need to pull this out. We need to put the secret sauce front and center. It's something that we need to be sharing with the broader Chronic Boss community. And so for those who don't know, we're all about unlocking your secret sauce at Chronic Boss Collective. And that is when you take a skill that you have that you're good at. So, sales is an example of a skill, or problem solving, or writer, whatever it might be. And then you marry that with a superpower that you've gained from living with your chronic condition. This could be resilience, adaptability, flexibility, you name it. And then that is your secret sauce. You put those two together, and that's your secret sauce. Justine, you do a beautiful job articulating your secret sauce and how your chronic conditions have actually made you better at what you do. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that and how you reached that special formula.
Yeah. I mean, I think you just explained it beautifully. And where I really married those two things was sales and process. And so my brain thinks in terms of a process because of my chronic conditions. And I tell this story a lot, actually, as something that relates to business, but is also very personal to me. What I find really interesting is the level of accountability you have to have as someone with a chronic illness is more than the average person. Because we have doctor's appointments so much more than the average person, right? And so we have to plan for those, fit them into our schedule. Before I go to any doctor's appointment, because I have a blood related disorder, which is one of my autoimmunes, I have to get labs, and then I have to fast for those labs, and I have to have those labs done 48 hours before my appointment. And no one's reminding me of these things. No one's telling me, no one's calling me. No one's putting it on my calendar. I have to take complete responsibility for those things. So if I go to my doctor's appointment and I don't have labs, they can't serve me. And now I have to pay a copay twice and delay my appointment by another 6 months because you can't get in at the doctors that are specialists for these types of conditions for a really long time. There's a lot of that going on. And I was saying to people, I learned the medical codes that I had to know that go into the system. And I learned from the phlebotomist, I would ask questions about where the standing orders were kept in the computer if I was missing one because my labs were going to be late and I didn't want to have to reschedule or create a different appointment. So I learned all this jargon. So I would have a reminder on my calendar. I would have an alarm on my phone. I would show up at the place early. If the order wasn't there, I would tell her what medical code she would have to type in and where in the system she could look because I had notes in a little notebook. So I never missed a lab ever. And it was a process. I had to learn the process. I had to memorize the steps. I had to have a system for it and I had to be prepared. And these are things that like normal, quote unquote, whatever that means, but like normal people like my partner doesn't need to ever think about. He goes to the doctor once a year for a physical. It's 20 minutes in and out, never thinks about it again. And I'm going to the doctor 5 times a month and getting multiple lab draws and scheduling appointments and all of these things. So there's just so much to that. And then once I took that and applied it into sales and into thinking about, okay, well, typically people would just go get a sale, right? Like you meet someone, you make an offer, you follow up. On paper, it's very simple, but there's a process to that. And there are steps within every section of the process. And there's personal accountability as the salesperson you have to hold. And so I started thinking about how much I can simplify processes for people and how I think in a very direct order of things because I've had to program my mind to work like that. And it's really interesting because it's the antithesis of what someone with ADHD, which I also have, would do. And so when people meet me, they always go, "You are so organized. You are like systems oriented. You've got frameworks for everything." And I'm like, I've literally trained myself to be this way and learn these skills because of my chronic illness.
Incredible. And it really is a superpower that you have. And you do have such a special way with sales and sales philosophy, and one that is designed to help people feel more comfortable and not feel like people often hear the word sales and I feel like they think of like a sleazy car salesman.
Yeah.
And you're trying to totally flip the script on that too. And so I'd love to hear when you talk about the concept of feel good selling, what does that mean? And how do you help clients find their unique way that's to sell that feels good for them?
Yeah. I think going back to frameworks, for me, there's freedom in a framework. There's a lot of empowerment in a framework because we know who we are. We know the steps arbitrarily that we need to take throughout the sales process, but it's not set up in a way to support the way that we handle anxiety, right? So one of the main chronic illnesses, like a lot of members of Chronic Boss express having struggles with anxiety in one way, shape, or form. And I think there's a lot of sales anxiety for people who are newer to sales or don't have mastery of sales skills, which is a lot of business owners. And so when you get on a call, you can have all the best intentions, you can have beautiful scripting, everything's ready to go. And then you get on that call and you're asked a question that makes your brain go, "Oh no, I don't know how to answer that." And you start to go into fight, flight, freeze, appease, right? Like you go through this moment where you're almost outside of your body. What do I do now? This isn't in the script. This wasn't what I planned for. They're asking me things and I don't know how to react. And you as a person know how you would react. But there's also this really weird thing that happens to a lot of people on sales calls where we shift into what I call like, I have a doctor's office voice. Whenever I call the doctor's office, suddenly I'm very professional. I'm like, "Good afternoon." I don't speak with an accent, but I show up on that call with a very different energy, and people show up on calls not as themselves, but in this weird sales persona version of themselves. And so they're not able, it's almost like you detach from who you are. So they're not able to just react as if they would to a friend because they're trying to remember all the steps and they're trying to follow the scripts and they're trying to do the right thing versus just being themselves. But when they're given a framework, which is what I give all my clients, then they're like, "Oh, I just operate in this framework. And then I know what my parameters are. So I can be myself and make sure that I'm hitting all these marks." And once I'm hitting these marks, which are pretty simple, and they learn how to do it in their own way, which we do a lot of role plays in my community. So we'll do practice of this framework and we'll help them shape their responses and get comfortable answering questions on the fly and doing things which a lot of people also don't do on a regular basis. So it's not just person to person either. We use AI and have built systems in AI to do role play and trainings and things. So you can get unlimited levels of practice with this. And I think practice makes progress. And the more, again, just like confidence, you flex the muscle of what actually makes me feel like myself, just like what makes me feel confident, the more you understand what feel good selling means to you. And there's not one definition. Every person is going to feel really different. Some people sell very differently than I would sell. And I watch them just blossom like a flower. They're on that, role play situation. And I'm like, well, that's not anything like what I would say, but that was so you. And it was so good. And it was really effective. And that's the beauty of giving yourself a framework.
Okay, love it. So it sounds like you're helping coach people to find their own unique framework. But is there anything that you would say is pretty universal that if for our owners, our chronic bosses on the call, is there one thing that people could do today to improve their sales conversations that they're having?
Yes. Well, first, I want to clarify I'm not helping people find their framework. I'm helping people tap into their natural sales style within my framework. So people are
Mm,
buying into the way that I sell, following that framework with their own natural style of how they communicate the different pieces of it.
I love that.
So there's that part of it. The one thing I would say to everybody, if you are not given a proven framework or something to follow on sales calls, the number one tip is to sell more. It's get on more sales calls. They don't even have to be formally known as a sales call. I have a lot of people where I'll just say, sell your offer to your partner tonight at the dinner table, sell your offer to a friend, call your mom and see if you could do a little role play with them. Like, get on coffee chats with people that you just want to get to know. Reach out. Almost everybody who has a business has 50 to 100 friends that are following them. Reach out to those people and say, hey, you want to hop on a quick coffee chat and just like talk about what we do and network and see how we can support each other, and ask for that. Like, just talking about what you do and practicing and hearing questions, even from unqualified buyers. It's not as ideal as having feedback from an expert or having a conversation with someone who's a genuine qualified lead, but it's better than nothing. And most people, what they do in the reverse of that is they quietly feel bad about their sales skills and they don't take calls because they're afraid that they're going to look bad or be embarrassed. And then the skills never improve. And so one of the things that I say a lot when people say, I think I'm bad at sales, my response is always, you probably are. I'm not trying to make you feel better by saying like, no, you're not. You're just learning. It's like, that's not helpful. You need to just hear, you probably are. And like, that's actually amazing that you recognize that, because now that you're aware, you can fix it. And
Yeah.
we don't want to bury our feelings under a rock, just like with chronic illness. Like, maybe I'm limited. You probably are, but not in a way that has to disempower you, and not in a way that you can't make accommodations for, and not in a way that you can't find a solution for. So we shift out of the victim, blamey, shamey type of modes, and we shift into something that's, well, what are you going to do about it? Let's find solutions. Let's find empowerment in it.
Oh my God, yes. That is what we're all about at Chronic Boss, is that finding empowerment. How do we make it happen? We want to get it done. And I love that. In talking about that, you've made accommodations, you've made shifts because you have to operate differently as a business owner because you are living with multiple chronic conditions. I've watched you, and in conversations we've had, I really admire the way that you are efficient with your business, and you've created something that's very sustainable for you.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to hear, one, how you did that, and what does it look like? How do you have a business that supports you and in your health and your wealth?
Well, to normalize this for everyone, I did it wrong 500 times before I got it right.
Okay, I love that.
I am the classic overnight success story that took 10 years to get to, because I think a lot of it is just learning yourself. And for a lot of years, because of chronic illness, and this is something that a lot of people don't talk about and be vulnerable about, is there's a lot of shame associated with that. There's a lot of like, what did I do to cause these things? Or, to be somebody who would be struggling with or suffering from certain things that other people never have to even think about in their whole life. And that that's attached to a lot of guilt and shame and, self-doubt and worthiness and all of these things that Chronic Boss has given me such a gift in community by being able to say those things out loud and have people who actually get it. It's not like talking to a friend who's perfectly healthy and has nothing going on that's even similar to what you've dealt with. It's talking to people who are like, I've had a chronic migraine for 4 days too. And like, here's something that helps me. One of the very first things that I did in Chronic Boss was I struggle with insomnia, and it's partly my ADHD, partly because I get chronic migraines. There's a couple of different things going on. And I posted like, I'm really struggling with insomnia. Does anyone have suggestions? And somebody said, have you tried listening to binaural beats before bed? And I was like, I've never even heard of that. Like, what is that? And she's like, oh, I'll send you a Spotify playlist. I get the playlist. I listen to that every night, and I have consistently slept so much better because of that one suggestion. And it's like,
Oh my God.
nobody else would know, right? Like no one else might even have, or even with the chronic migraines, somebody was talking about, you can get these special glasses and they can help filter out like certain rays that hit your eyes that make your migraines worse. And they're so much better for you. And they're actually not that expensive. And here's the brand that I bought, so I know it's a trusted brand. And it's those types of things where you could ask your doctor's office, you could ask friends, you could do some research online, sure. But hearing it from someone who has had the same issues for years is so much better. And it makes you feel so much more excitement about that thing, because you know that if it's worked for someone else that I personally have had conversations with, then I feel like it's going to work better for me. And marketing stat, 93% of people make purchasing decisions based on a recommendation or a referral. So instead of just going to Amazon and looking at the top, 5,000 reviews, I'm just asking a community of people who I know struggle with what I struggle with. And it's not just random people who bought it for their sibling or their neighbor or bought it for themselves and then returned it because they were paid affiliates or whatever. I'm getting it right from that person's voice. And so that's been so helpful. And now my ADHD's kicked in and I forget the original question that you asked me.
It's perfect because that was a great plug for community. And it is. And that's, we are all helping each other both on health and career issues. And I know, Justine, that you've worked with a number of folks in our collective on their sales strategy. And so
Yeah.
we're all supporting each other on all sides. So I'd actually love to know, so that sounds like the community has been helpful for you in both managing your business and your health.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any specific ways that you're structuring your day, your business, are you batching content? What does it look like? How do you
Oh,
manage?
yes.
You have a flare. I assume, or I think you've got some systems in place to ensure that your business keeps running even if you're not.
Yes. So your question earlier was how I built a business to support me and put those systems in place. So
Yeah.
I think what I've learned most about how my business needs to be run is early on, I think we do a lot of unscalable things. We take on a lot of one-on-one clients. When I started my business, I actually started as an agency model. I was doing marketing agency support and a little bit of sales enablement. So it was different than the business that I have now, where I do a lot of coaching and support in that way. But when I started that business, I just remember like working all hours of the day, all hours of the night. I would work nights, I would work weekends, whatever it took to kind of get the business off the ground. And as someone with a chronic illness, that had a lot of harmful side effects for me, more so than the average person, because again, my sleep was suffering, my focus wasn't as great. My results were reflective of that. I struggled a lot with big high months of revenue and then feeling so burnt out and depleted that I would have to take a step away for a while and all of my leads would dry up. And then I would have to kind of recharge and start over again. And it was this very aggressive cyclical process where it would be high month, low month, high month, low month, low month, low month, high month, high month. And there was a lot of inconsistency. And then as I started to just make note of, well, what seemed to work well in the high months? What seemed to not work well in the low months? And how can I do more of what worked and the opposite of what didn't work? And getting curious about what was supportive for me. And also coming to a place of acceptance as a business owner. I was fed a story, a lie, so to speak, that as a business owner, you work 80 hours to not work 40 hours. That's like a very common phrase that people say about entrepreneurship. You work twice as hard for, the freedom of entrepreneurship. And I thought, well, then why would anyone do it? If you have to work 80 hours consistently until the end of time, like that sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. And so then came the thought, I make my own schedule. I could take Fridays off. I could not start working until 10 a.m. Like whatever I needed in support of me was what I could give myself. Now, here's the biggest realization that I've had more recently as well, because my business has become 10 times more sustainable and scalable over the past year or so, which was the thought that when I make that decision, it doesn't have to be all the time, every day, final. It can be, I can build in flex time and I can also work during that flex time if I feel called. So one of the things that I actually got coaching on recently was about my routine. And I said to my coach, I love taking a morning walk outside, but then I also get a little bit stressed about it because I'll wake up and it will be raining and I'll have to decide, do I want to go for a walk in the rain? Do I want to walk on the treadmill? Do I want to skip the walk? Or I have client calls back to back all day. And I feel like if I go for a walk and then have to, get into those calls, is it going to impact my energy? And so she gave me the freedom to say, why do you have to walk every single day without like changing the routine at all? Why can't you just wake up and ask, is today the day that I go for a walk? Or is today the day that I get into work early? Or is today the day where I go for a walk a little bit later in the day? And that flexibility is why we own businesses in large part, to be able to say, Fridays are my flex day. Typically, I don't do things on Fridays, but tomorrow I have a photo shoot. So I am technically working on a Friday. Yeah. And I have the freedom to be able to do that because I don't schedule calls on Fridays, or I'm onboarding a new client and they need something on Monday in terms of support. And I was like, I can make that work. Even though I don't typically take calls on Mondays, I could be flexible with that. And so there's certain situations where I'm the boss. So I get to say approve or reject this suggestion, right? And I think that's another example of that freedom and flexibility. I don't have to take a walk every day, never work a Friday, never take a call on a Monday, or always work on Tuesdays. I get to choose what my schedule looks like and I get to operate in that freedom.
Beautifully said. I mean, we don't have to put ourselves in a box. We make our own box. And it doesn't have to be a box. It could be a boat. It could be a plane. It could be whatever you want it to be, right? And so I love that. And I think it's important and really sound advice and it's not going to look the same. And maybe one season you have one routine that's really working, but then the next it's totally different and you have to switch it up and that's okay.
Yeah, that's a super important point because I also have small children. And in the summer months, we have to adjust the schedule a little bit because sometimes I'm with them more in the summer than I am in other seasons. And that creates a shift and that creates the need to kind of move things to fit me and support me a little bit better. And also it's about learning routines. So 2 years ago, I took the entire summer off. I took 14 weeks of time off in a row and I canceled all clients. I didn't have any calls. I literally had nothing work-wise on my schedule.
Wow.
It was a lot. And when people were like, oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. How did it go? I was like, it was horrible. It was the worst choice I could have made because I love what I do so much that it actually gave me grief. I grieved for like the first 6 weeks, the loss of connection to people who I loved supporting and serving. I grieved time for just me. I grieved the lack of ability to work on something that was mine and not for other people. I felt like this is what happens to mothers all over the place who lose their identity in their kids because they give up everything that's important to them and matters to them in support and service of other people or their children in particular. And my kids also suffered because they wanted to go to camp with their friends. They wanted to spend time doing things not with mom. And while we did make the most of our time and we had a wonderful time together, and like the presence and me being in those moments with them and finding fun things to do and exploring and all of that and getting the rest and reflection time, like there were a lot of benefits to it. I have told so many people, like, do not recommend, wouldn't do it again. And this summer we did an every other week home with mom and then at camp. And it was so much better, but it still was a little bit not quite right.
Mm.
And I think that, you know, part of it was the camp that they went to, they didn't love. And then there were certain things that I set up in my business that I didn't love. And I was a little bit behind in preparations for certain things that I wanted to be ahead of. And there were just certain things going on that I learned from both situations. And next summer will be even better. Probably not perfect, but better. And we'll keep going, and just practice makes progress. We learn as we go. So I don't think that there's just like a magical, oh, I'm just going to decide to do it this way and it's just going to be wonderful. It's, we've got to go through the process of it and learn that felt good, that didn't feel good, that worked, that didn't work. Where do we end up here? What can we do better? What can we do differently? What can we do that works for us, which is not necessarily going to work for other people? Some people might love taking the whole summer off. Some people might not take any of the summer off. And I'm just trying to find my way.
I really appreciate, Justine, you sharing this experience and saying, hey, this wasn't for me. And I
Yeah.
do think there's another piece that we have to remember here that comes into play and can mess with our psyche, which is the societal pressure that's telling us, well, this is what you should, as a mom, you should be spending time with your kids, or when you're on vacation, you shouldn't open your laptop because you need to turn off. I remember Lauren Perna, our chief community officer, wrote when she went on a cruise, she pulled out her laptop because she really felt moved and excited that she wanted to write a blog post, but she initially felt kind of guilty about it because she's like, oh, I shouldn't be working, I'm on vacation. But for those of us who really truly love our work, which is a gift,
Yeah.
it fuels us. And there's nothing wrong with, if you want to take out your laptop on vacation, by all means, go for it. And if you want to be a mom that's working on her business and spending time with her kids, do it. Who cares? Like, you gotta block out the noise, but it's hard to block out the noise when we're just constantly being fed so many different thoughts and opinions. You guessed it, social media, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think with that societal pressure, a lot of it is even more so the people in your environment make a bigger impact. And I'm very mindful of who I surround myself with, partially because of, again, the chronic illnesses and acceptance and the levels, the people that I let in to my really inner circle is pretty small. And so I have lots of acquaintances and lots of people that I love to see when I see them, but there's only a small core group of people that I really fully let in. And those people are the ones who I say, like, this is what I'm doing. And they're like, hell yeah, love that for you. It doesn't matter what it is. And I'm the same way. There was actually, Simon Sinek has a podcast called
I
A Bit
love
of
him.
Optimism. Yeah, it's so good. And in one of the episodes, he said, it's really easy to find friends who will support you during hard times. Like, I'm struggling, there's a problem with my job, there's a problem with my partner, I have a problem. And it's really easy for other people to chime in and give their opinions and support you in the time of need. But very rarely do you meet a friend that you can just call to brag on yourself and be like, you know why I'm the best? Let me tell you, right? And I actually have a very close friend. We talk almost every day. And she said to me one time, you know what I love and appreciate most about our friendship? It's not like the great advice we give each other or the recipes we share or the book clubs that we start, just the two of us. It's the moments where I really just want to brag on myself and you are here for it. And you just want to hear it and you want to cheer me on and you want to be there in those moments. And so I think, societal pressure aside, it's really important to set up your inner circle and your environment of supportive people and systems and structures that work for you, because there's always going to be noise and there's always going to be opinions, but you need the people. Sometimes it can't come fully internally from you just wanting to do it. Sometimes you need to hear from other people because we are social creatures. It's okay to do that. It's actually good to do that. Or I'm cheering for you for doing that. And I say to my friends all the time, I'm not a stay-at-home mom. I am not a Pinterest mom. I am not the mom who like bakes with my kids. It gives me so much anxiety. I'm like, don't make a mess of my kitchen. Don't waste the eggs in the fridge. Like I am just not that way. And so anytime they're like, I want to decorate, I'm like, who can we hire for that? Like, that's the type of mom that I am. I am not the one who's like, let's make custom paper mache whatevers. I'm like, that doesn't sound fun to me. But you know what I will do? I will snuggle you and I will tell you stories from my brain and I will go on adventures with you and do so many fun things with you. But there are certain places where I draw the line, and one of them is taking summers off, and that's okay.
This is so, Justine, such good advice. And it's so true. Finding, I guess I really haven't thought about that much personally, how important it is to have these people cheering you on in your life. And I actually feel like personally, I've really come into that in the past year or two with a fiance who's incredibly
Yeah.
supportive, the most supportive partner I've ever had.
I
And
love
before
that
I
for
felt
you.
like, yeah, I love it. I felt like I had partners who I was making myself smaller, right? Because
Mm,
I was dimming my light because I didn't want to intimidate them or I
right.
didn't want them to feel lesser than. And I have some amazing girlfriends too who are like, when's the podcast launching? We're doing a launch party. We can't wait. We're so excited. And it's like, we do need those people in our lives. And especially when you are an entrepreneur and if you start to see that success, right? It's like
Yeah.
people around you, there are certain people who are not going to react to that the way that you would expect them to. People who maybe wouldn't who don't cheer you on because maybe you're intimidating them or you're making them feel lesser than. And that's hard. That's a hard dynamic to manage and a tough pill to swallow. And I think it's something that a lot of us face as we are on our entrepreneurial journeys. So I love that you are reinforcing the importance of finding your people. And it doesn't have to be a massive group, a couple of core people who are going to be there and be your cheerleaders and champions is
Yeah.
so important to have in this journey as entrepreneurs and as people living with chronic conditions.
Yes. I mean, my friends and I have hard conversations all the time. Like,
Mhm.
it's funny, if you were a fly on the wall, I had friends over who I've been friends with since college, and they're very, very good friends of ours. And they came over for dinner one night, and we just have differing opinions about certain things. And we love to just get into it and talk to each other. And we're both very passionate. And so, like, my husband and his partner were like, let's just back away. Justine is like, they're doing their own thing. We need to just let them be. And my kids come into the room. They're like, are you arguing? What's happening? We're like, no, we're both very passionate. And we're like going back and forth and we're having this conversation. And then they go to leave. And at the end of the night, we're just hugging each other. Like, I love you so much. I respect your opinions. Like, what a great conversation. We talk about money. We talk about politics. We talk about spirituality. We talk about, so many things. We talk about sex, like things that people don't talk about, that shy away from. And we're just like, if you're my friend, if you're in this inner circle, we have to be able to have conversations that are hard and that other people avoid and that are worth having a dinner party over. Like, I want to crack up at your like latest faux pas that happened, or talk about money and how you're investing it, and politics and what you're thinking about, and, sports teams and things that are very divisive for a lot of people. We just welcome it and we have those conversations, and it doesn't impact our friendship or our relationship in any way, except for we both show up. And that's how I kind of picked my friends over the years. Was I want people who, when I bring up something that's contradictory, they're like, what can I learn from that? Because that's how
Mhm.
I think, is what can your perspective bring to me, whether it's more, love and respect for my own opinions and understanding of you, or maybe it's shifting my opinions. And if you asked anyone in my family who I am today versus who I was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I met these friends, they would be like, she's a totally different person. And
Mm.
that's a lot in part to who I surround myself with and how I challenge myself and things that I learn about. And when I don't know something, or when I feel like, oh, that's sticky for me, or that's bringing up something, instead of shying away from it, I lean in. I'm like, who do I know, or who's in my world who can like rock my world about this? Who can give me a different perspective? Who can open me up, and vice versa? I don't want to have conversations with people where they all think and feel the same way, and we never challenge each other, and we never invite hard conversations to happen, because you don't grow that way. You just sort of placate each other, and it's a very boring life. And so for me, I look for those moments of like, that was uncomfortable and it was so fun.
Who can rock my world? I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and to tie it back to this concept of chronic bosses and connecting with other women who you're going to connect on a deeper level with, I think that that's something really special about the chronic boss community, is that we're not at the surface. We are connecting on these deeper topics, and we
Yeah.
really understand each other. And I think that like when you think about finding your close friends, you want some of those values. And then as you think about the networking groups that you're building, there are so many different ones out there. Where are you spending your time and energy, and who are your clients? You were talking about this earlier too, right? Like, you don't want those clients who aren't going to support who you are and allow you to show up fully as yourself. So
Yeah.
where can you enter networks in life and in work that are going to fully support you and allow you to show up as you are? And so I am proud to say I do feel like that's what we have in Chronic Boss.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely do. And it's the heart and soul of the organization is kind of kicking down the walls and changing the paradigm of how conversations are started. Like, you
Well,
think about almost as if networking is dating. On your first date with somebody, you don't typically say like, "Hi, I'm Justine. I have multiple autoimmune conditions. Like, let me tell you about these deep, dark secrets." But in Chronic Boss, it's like, that's the first thing people get to know about you. And not in a bad way. Not like I have to say this, but like, I'm excited that I get to practice talking about this, and that I know it's going to be received well because other people are doing the same thing. It's like you're being a little bit pushed outside of your comfort zone. At least I was when I joined, of like having a space where you could or could not list your chronic conditions in the member directory. And
mhm.
to me, it was so interesting to go in and be like, I wonder who else has the same conditions. Like, how many people in here struggle with this, and what can I learn from them? And then also, like, if someone has a different condition, how does that impact them? And it's been very interesting to lead with something that's so vulnerable, because it has created also very instantaneous connections where you could wait months or years to network with people and find out more about their life. But because you lead with something so vulnerable, it's like you're talking about your fears, you're opening up about struggles much quicker, which also serves you better because you're able to have the tough conversations. And when you open that up, it opens up a Pandora's box of solutions as well, because everyone's coming in resourced and looking to share and support and uplift people. And that's what I try to do. I run speed networking events every month, and I try to cultivate an environment where people are empowered from a sales perspective at the very top of that event, because I want people to come in. I'm leading in facilitating that, and I am a sales coach. So I want them to experience how it feels to present your offer in a really empowered, confident manner. And so I create prompts specifically to set them up for that. And I think as networking groups I look for and places where I want to find myself, I always look to what are the values of this organization? What types of vocabulary are they using that I feel mirrors my emotions and what I care about and how I want to be and think and feel when I'm in a place. And that's what I felt when I first came across Chronic Boss was, we are women with big ambition and chronic conditions. And I was like, that's me. Like, I am
Yeah.
that person. And so it was an instant resonance. And with my clients, it's a little bit different too. I always look for people. I always say to my clients, I'm a little too good at sales. I have to trust that you are selling something in integrity, that you have a really incredible offer, and that you are considering yourself to be the best at what you do, because I am going to help you sell your offer. And I want to support people who really care about doing good work. And so there's a quote by the incredible Florence Scovel Shinn from the 1920s. She wrote a bunch of books on business. And in one of them, she says, "We do wonderful work in a wonderful way and give wonderful service for wonderful pay." And that is what my clients and what I embody in the work. And that's who I look to align with, are the people who do that and who live that and who model that. And when I see it, it's very instant. You see it in someone, you see how much they care. When I met you the first time, it was like, I'm not meeting somebody who's just like, let me see if I could create a business out of chronic illness. You were like, no, women with chronic illness and big ambition need to be seen and heard and respected and adored, and they need to be empowered, and they need to be in community with each other, and they need to take it to the next level. And we need to hear their voices, and we demand that they speak up and use their talents in a bigger way and find their superpower and their secret sauce and all of these things. And like, I still, every time I think about you or the mission that you're building, I still get goosebumps because I'm like, it's so authentic. It's so real. It's not something that you can fake. It just comes across so naturally and so easily and just flows. And I think that's where I like to dedicate my time, is to communities that embody everything that you stand for.
Justine, oh my God, I'm going to have to just sit and play this back for myself every time I'm feeling
Have
down.
it be a
Thank
little
you.
nighttime meditation.
Yeah. This is so awesome. So Justine, I've got one more question for you, but first, tell people where they can find you, how they can come to your networking events, how they can
Yeah.
work with you. Give us the
Okay.
rundown.
So monthlyspeednetworking.com is where you can get access to the speed networking. And then you can find me anywhere through Sell with Justine. So sellwithjustine.com. All my handles are Sell with Justine. You can find out more about Close Sales on Repeat, which is my program, at closesalesonrepeat.com. And all of that's from my website as well. And then I also have a podcast called Why You Hate Sales, which is reframing a lot of those core beliefs that we're taught about sales that are just not true, and empowering you to feel better about how you sell. So that's just whyouhatesales.com. And again, all of that through sellwithjustine.com.
Amazing. We'll include that in the show notes. You also have the best domains. You
Oh,
got some good
thanks.
ones. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So, all right, wrapping up, of course, my final question has to be, what does being a chronic boss mean to you?
I think it means so many things, but most of all, it's really just embracing all of you, like the wholeness of you. It's not, I'm a boss and I also have on the side these chronic illnesses. And it's not, I have these chronic illnesses and on the side, I also run a business. It's the blending of those two things together, because it's who we are as a whole human being. We live every day, and that's the beauty of the secret sauce. Like, we live every day being able to blend those things together to be the whole version of ourselves that shows up and uses this secret sauce to be the best versions of who we are. And so to me, that's what it means to be a chronic boss.
Perfection. Justine, you are absolutely brilliant. This conversation has been so eye-opening, enlightening, packed with wisdom. It is such a joy and an honor to have the opportunity to spend this time with you. And I'm sure our audience has gotten just tons of new nuggets of knowledge. So Justine, you're the best. Please go like, follow, engage, interact with Justine, hire her, go to her networking events, because you're going to get something out of it. She's fabulous. Justine, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. And vice versa. Rate and review this podcast. Let's amplify the voices of chronic bosses everywhere. Get into the community, join our networking events, come and talk to members, get to know us, because this is when you realize there's a whole community of people who look like me, but we're so different as well, and we can amplify each other in so many ways. It's such a magical space to learn and grow together. So I'm grateful to be a part of it, grateful to be here, and always grateful to spend time with you.
Thanks, Justine. Thanks, everyone. And that's a wrap on this episode of Chronic Boss Unfiltered. But there are so many other ways we can stay connected. Head to chronicboss.com to access free resources, explore our membership, and join the community. You'll find all the links you need in the episode notes below. If this episode spoke to you, send it to a friend who gets it. Leave us a review or hit that follow button so you never miss a moment. Thank you for spending this time with us. Cheers to you, your health, and your wealth. See you next time.